Hello, Mr. Allman here, and this is your Allmancast introduction to photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a multi-step enzyme-catalyzed set of reactions during which plants and other photosynthetic material are going to convert the energy present in light into carbohydrates. In this video, I want to highlight for you a little bit of introduction into the process of photosynthesis and give you just a very brief overview of the inputs and outputs of the major parts of the processes. To begin with, please understand that photosynthesis has a unique evolutionary relationship with respiration, in that the products of photosynthesis, the oxygen and the water being released into the air, are actually the reactants for cell respiration, and vice versa. So all of the oxygen that we rely upon as heterotrophs is actually supplied and was originally supplied by photosynthetic organisms. Without that oxygen and without the presence of those photosynthesizers in Earth's past, there would be no multicellular animals alive today. Please also remember that it is light that makes food. All of the matter that's present in the fruits, the grains, the stems, the roots that we eat day in and day out, the energy that was necessary to be able to produce those things came from light. And so light that shines here upon the earth is ultimately what makes us food. It would be beneficial for you to know the chemical reaction for photosynthesis, beginning with carbon dioxide, to that adding molecules of water, producing carbohydrates, symbolized here by a molecule of glucose, C6H12O6, plus 6O2. Now, to be a little bit more technical, glucose is not actually a product of photosynthesis. However, the carbohydrates that are produced at the end of the photosynthetic process, a few steps later beyond photosynthesis, are actually created through a process of anabolism. Now, plants are generally what we think of in photosynthesizers, but much, if not most, of the photosynthetic organisms out there are really not plants. Most of the oxygen in our atmosphere is generated by the bacteria and by the protists, namely the algae that live in the oceans. And the combined mass of those will actually outweigh the mass of all of these land plants. But because they're single-celled, because they're so small, we tend not to think of them. However, they are very important in terms of thinking of the role of photosynthesis in ecosystems. The place that photosynthesis occurs is in a structure called the chloroplast. The chloroplast is going to be found in very large numbers in a group of cells called the palisade mesophyll cells. These mesophyll cells are located near the surface of the leaf. There are some types of leaves where you'll notice that the color at the top and the bottom is actually not the same. The top of the leaf is much more brightly green. And that's because the pigment, chlorophyll, that produces the greenness of a plant leaf is going to be much more concentrated in the cells at the top of the leaf rather than the cells there at the bottom. So photosynthesis begins with light. That light originally comes from the sun, and that light is chock full of energy. That energy is going to be used first in a set of reactions called the light-dependent reactions. The light-dependent reactions are going to produce ATP, and that ATP is going to be utilized in the light-independent reactions, during which carbohydrates are going to be the final product. This diagram summarizes these processes. As you can see, the light-dependent reactions, these occur in the thylakoid membranes of the chloroplast. The light, which is coming from the sun, that energy is used to drive the production of ATP and NADPH, which is a large complex molecule that is capable of holding and transporting electrons from one place to another. Water is another necessary ingredient here, and that provides the electrons that are needed, and after the electrons are taken from water, oxygen gas is going to be produced as a waste product. So you can see the H2O there as a product along with light, O2 down at the bottom as a byproduct that will be released into the atmosphere. The light-dependent reaction is also known as the Calvin cycle, named after one of the scientists who worked to be able to decipher the steps of this cycle. This also occurs in the chloroplast, but in a separate part called the stroma. Here, the ATP and the NADPH, which are the products of the light-dependent reactions, here they are used to incorporate carbon dioxide as a raw material to be able to make a small 3-carbon sugar. Those 3-carbon sugars will later be converted into glucose, and then from there into sucrose, cellulose, starch, or other molecules. Now the light from the sun, what happens to that light is that it hits the electrons that are being held by the chlorophyll molecules. Those electrons become excited, and when they become excited, the energy from those excited electrons can be harnessed to do other things within the chloroplast. The photosystem is the name of the set of reactions that happens to be able to utilize the energy that was transferred from the photon of light from the sun to the electrons of chlorophyll. The reason why water is needed is because chlorophyll is losing electrons. As those electrons are excited, they're being passed on to other proteins in these photosystems. Water is provided to replace those electrons. Photolysis, or the splitting by light, is going to be the chemical process by which water will be divided, releasing protons, oxygen gas, and electrons. Those electrons are going to go back to replace the ones that were lost by chlorophyll, while the oxygen gas will be released as a byproduct. Chemiosmosis is the name of the chemical process by which ATP synthase, a very important enzyme that's going to be present in chloroplasts and in mitochondria, is going to produce ATP, which will be used as a source of energy for other purposes within the cell. This analogy should help you to understand the role of light and electrons. Here you can see that the photon of light hits the chlorophyll and releases an excited electron. That excited electron is going to move through a set of enzymes in the electron transport chain and is going to drive the production of ATP. That ATP can be utilized as a source of energy or later be used to be able to produce carbohydrates. Those electrons can be re-excited as well to produce NADPH, which holds those electrons temporarily, represented here by the bucket, until they can be used in the Calvin cycle in the light-independent reactions. So here summarizes the inputs and outputs: light, ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and a free inorganic phosphate. Those, as well as NADP plus and water, are the things that are going to be required in order for this first part of photosynthesis to occur. The outputs will be ATP, which is a source of energy, NADPH, which is an electron carrier, and O2, which will be released from the leaf or from the plant or from the photosynthetic organism as a byproduct. From there we move to the light-independent reactions, which are also called the Calvin cycle. In this, we're going to have 3 main phases. The purpose of these different parts are to be able to utilize the energy from the light-dependent reactions to be able to combine, change, and create carbohydrates using carbon dioxide as the main source of matter. In order to increase efficiency, this process occurs in a cycle. So in the first phase, the carbon is fixed. The CO2 is added onto a large molecule of sugar. That then is going to be converted into other forms, some small pieces of which can be used to be able to produce glucose. Then the whole process will be reset in the end of the Calvin cycle to be able to recycle that initial sugar which the process began with. The inputs of the light-independent reactions are 3 carbon dioxide, 9 ATP, 6 NADPH. That's going to be per small sugar molecule that's produced. The output is going to be 1 small molecule of sugar, that is going to be about half the size of a glucose molecule, plus a number of ADP and phosphates, so these are ATP that have been broken down into ADP and phosphate, and 6 NADPH, 6 NAD+, which have already lost their electron and proton during that Calvin cycle. Even though it is called the light-independent reactions, it is not correct to say that this is something that happens in the dark or something that happens during the nighttime after the plant has generated ATP. The Calvin cycle is happening simultaneously with the light-dependent reactions, so that the energy that is generated from the excitement of the electrons from chlorophyll is immediately going to be utilized to be able to produce these carbohydrates. So these things are happening simultaneously within the leaf and within plant cells of the leaf to be able to produce both ATP as well as these carbohydrates. The details of these processes, as well as the details about the structure of the chloroplast, are material that's necessary for high-level students only, and that will be covered in a separate video. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.